When people speak about Hollywood love stories, the name Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward always rises to the top. For decades, they were seen as the perfect couple, a union untouched by scandal, one that inspired millions who longed for something real in a world filled with temporary romances. But behind the public smiles and timeless photographs, there was a secret Newman carried in his heart, one Joanne would only reveal many years later. Joanne Woodward has always been admired not just as a brilliant actress but as a woman of rare dignity. Even now, at 95, she carries herself with the same grace she did when she first stepped into the limelight. People often describe her as resilient, strong, and fiercely devoted to her family. But it was that devotion that kept her silent about the burden Newman carried, a burden that shaped their love and tested their strength. The truth about Paul Newman's heartbreak was not something Joanne wanted to expose lightly. For most of her life, she believed some stories belonged only to the two people living them. Yet as age settled in and memories grew heavier, she decided the world deserved to understand the man behind the blue eyes. She wanted people to know that even legends carry wounds they cannot easily share. Paul Newman, to the outside world, was a man blessed with everything. He had the looks of a matinee idol, the respect of his peers, a career most actors could only dream of, and a marriage many thought was flawless. But if you asked Newman himself, he would quickly dismiss the notion of perfection. He often reminded people that life was never as simple as the magazines made it appear. He laughed at the idea of being ideal, because in his heart, he was carrying something that never allowed him to feel whole. Newman's childhood was not the glamorous beginning many would expect from someone destined for stardom. Born in 1925, in Shaker Heights, Ohio, he grew up during a time when families held tight to appearances, even when cracks ran deep inside the household. Newman's father ran a sporting goods store, and his mother encouraged his theatrical leanings, but the warmth of family life was complicated. Newman often felt like he had to earn approval, like he had to keep proving himself. That feeling of never quite being enough would stay with him long after fame arrived. This sense of not belonging, of always questioning himself, became part of his private struggles. Newman rarely spoke about it openly, because he believed that revealing vulnerability was dangerous in Hollywood. Stars were meant to shine, not stumble. And so he carried it quietly, burying his doubts beneath a charming smile and disarming humor that people loved. But Joanne, from the very beginning, saw through it. Their first meeting was not the kind of encounter people imagine for great romances. Newman was married at the time, and Joanne was young, full of fire and determination, determined not to be just another woman swept away by Hollywood illusions. Yet she noticed something in Newman's eyes, something deeper than the polished exterior he presented. It was not just charm, it was sorrow, carefully hidden but impossible to ignore for someone who cared to look. For years, Newman struggled with guilt from his first marriage. He married Jackie Wood in 1949, and together they had 3 children. But as his career grew and his path crossed with Woodward's, Newman felt torn between loyalty and the undeniable truth of his heart. Leaving his first wife was not something he took lightly, and it haunted him for much of his life. Even as he built a life with Joanne, he carried regret for the pain he caused. Joanne later admitted that Paul often wrestled with that guilt, and it was one of the secrets that weighed on him until the very end. The world adored Newman as an actor, but it was his personal battles that shaped him into the man Joanne loved. His decision to pursue a new life with Woodward was both liberating and tormenting. He once confessed that he felt he didn't deserve the happiness he found with Joanne, because it came at the cost of breaking apart another family. And Joanne, deeply empathetic, carried that burden with him. She stood by him, but she also knew that in quiet moments, his thoughts drifted to what he had lost. As the years passed, Newman became known for his loyalty to Joanne. Their marriage, lasting 50 years, seemed like a shining example of devotion in an industry notorious for infidelity and short-lived relationships. But within that long marriage, Newman continued to wrestle with a secret pain, his struggle with alcoholism. For Newman, drinking began as a way to ease his anxieties and insecurities, but over time, it became a shadow that darkened his brightest moments. Joanne saw it, lived through it, and supported him even when the world had no idea how much he was fighting. Newman himself later admitted that alcohol nearly destroyed the very thing he cherished most, his marriage and his family. He confessed in interviews that he was not always the husband he wanted to be, and that his drinking often brought tension into their home. Joanne, with quiet strength, helped him face the reality of his addiction. She refused to let the world define their marriage by its struggles, but behind closed doors, it was a battle she fought alongside him. The heartbreaking truth Joanne has revealed in recent years is that Newman's charm, his humor, and even his generosity were often masks for the pain he carried. He feared letting people see the broken parts of himself, worried they would no longer see him as the strong, confident man they admired. Joanne, however, saw it all. She knew his weaknesses, his guilt, his struggles with self-worth, and she loved him through them. But that love was not without cost. It required resilience, sacrifice, and forgiveness. One of the hardest truths Joanne shared was that Newman never fully forgave himself for his mistakes. Whether it was the pain caused by his first marriage, the times he disappointed his children, or the years lost to alcohol, Newman carried a heavy weight inside. Even as the world celebrated him as one of the greatest actors of his generation, he privately battled feelings of inadequacy. Joanne believed this was his greatest heartbreak, that he never truly saw himself the way she and the world saw him. By the time Newman passed away in 2008, he had found peace in some ways, but the echoes of those struggles remained. Joanne, now in her later years, has chosen to speak more openly about them, not to tarnish his legacy, but to honor the truth of who he was. She believes that people should remember Newman not just as a flawless icon, but as a human being who fought hard battles and loved deeply despite his flaws. As Joanne Woodward reflects on her life with Paul Newman, she understands that the secret she reveals today is not one of scandal, but one of humanity. The heartbreaking truth about Newman is that he spent his entire life trying to reconcile the image the world adored with the reality he felt inside. For all his success, Newman never felt entirely worthy of the love he received, and that quiet battle shaped everything he did. To the public, Newman was a man of extraordinary talent. His films, Cool Hand Luke, The Hustler, Butch Cassidy and The Sundance Kid, are etched into Hollywood history. He was the leading man with unforgettable eyes, the kind of actor whose presence filled the screen. Yet when the lights went down and the crowds disappeared, Newman often wrestled with doubts. Joanne revealed that he sometimes questioned whether people loved him for who he was or for the image they projected onto him. This fear of being misunderstood made Newman fiercely protective of his private life. He avoided the Hollywood social scene, preferring the quiet comfort of his Connecticut home with Joanne and their children. For Newman, family was his anchor, the one place where he could be himself without the weight of expectation. But even in those moments, the scars of his past haunted him. Joanne recalls nights when Paul would sit silently, lost in thought, struggling to balance gratitude for what he had with guilt for what he had left behind. Alcohol was one of the ways Newman coped with this inner turmoil. He once admitted, with his trademark wit, that he had a love affair with beer. But beneath the humor was a painful truth: he used drinking as a way to numb feelings he could not express. Joanne has revealed that there were times when his drinking created distance between them, and moments when she feared their marriage might not survive. Yet she never gave up on him. She believed in his goodness, even when he doubted himself. It was through Joanne's strength that Newman eventually confronted his addiction. He chose to change, not just for himself, but for the woman who had stood by him through every storm. Newman later credited Joanne with saving his life in more ways than one. She gave him the courage to face his demons and the reason to keep fighting when it seemed easier to hide. Beyond his personal battles, Newman also carried a deep awareness of the suffering in the world. Perhaps as a way of balancing his inner guilt, he devoted himself to philanthropy. The secret Joanne reveals at 95 is not meant to sadden, but to remind people that even those we admire most are human. Paul Newman's story is not just about success and fame, it is about the quiet battles we cannot always see. Joanne wants the world to understand that loving someone means embracing their flaws as much as their strengths. Her marriage to Newman was filled with both light and darkness, but through it all, she never stopped believing in the man behind the legend. Joanne's revelation also speaks to her own resilience. For decades, she chose to protect Newman's struggles, allowing the world to see only the parts he was comfortable sharing. Now, in her later years, she feels it is important to tell the full story, not for herself, but for the generations who look to their love as a symbol of perfection. She wants people to know that their love was real because it was imperfect, built not on illusions, but on forgiveness, loyalty, and understanding.